I do think that a big part of self-care in a strange way is also community care. And remembering that we are connected to one another. A win-win solution isn't always available to us, but I do think that there is something to be said for looking for creative solutions in relationship with the people that we are connected to and to whom we owe things. We do owe things to one another, actually. That's a part of working together, being in a society, and we have to get in the weeds with each other to find out what works best for as many of us as possible.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Bethaney Wilkinson is a writer, a spiritual director, podcaster, and facilitator who's passionate about slow, sustainable, and soul-nourishing living. Her new book is A More Beautiful Way to Live, 9 Practices to Unlearn Habits of Anxiety, Fear, and Urgency. In this episode, Bethaney and I talk about tending to your inner terrain, paying attention to your longings while also paying attention to realities and limitations, and the difference between your sphere of influence and your sphere of concern. Bethaney Wilkinson, I'm so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast to talk about your book, A More Beautiful Life.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Help me out with the subtitle. What's the subtitle of your book?
Oh, yes. It's, 9 Practices to Unlearn Habits of Anxiety, Fear, and Urgency.
Are you sure that's the subtitle? I think it might have changed.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's the subtitle. More Beautiful Way to Live, 9 Practices. Yes.
Okay, I guess you would know.
Well, I'm not sure. You know how perhaps you know how working with a publisher, they tweak things here and there in hopes of finding the right audience. And so I'm still learning how to say the whole title that was given to me.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me what you mean by when you say a more beautiful way to live. I guess if you explain what you mean by that, you will be giving a quick summary of your book. So what do you mean by a more beautiful way to live?
Yes. So when I think of a more beautiful way to live, it kind of came out of my experience of living quite the opposite, which was pretty anxious, feeling really untethered, scattered, afraid, just deeply disconnected from my body, from people around me. And I started craving, like, there has to be a more beautiful way to do this, to exist in the world. And so when I consider a more beautiful way to live, it's really about being present and being present when it's uncomfortable, being present in the midst of pain, being present to sometimes horrors that are happening in the world around you. And finding the resiliency to stand firm, to be grounded, to not look away, and to face the reality of life, to receive and accept it, while also finding your agency in the midst of all that difficulty. So a more beautiful way to live is both an orientation to the world as well as a way of relating to oneself.
Yeah. There are so many ways to avoid reality. And yet the only place you can have a good life is in reality.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yep. And a good life doesn't always mean an easy one or one that's without suffering or pain or discomfort. Oftentimes I find the reality of the suffering, the pain, and the discomfort is where a lot of the beautiful breaks in.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have this sort of 3-part formulation of being grounded, being present, and then receiving or accepting the life that you've been given. I'd love to kind of work through those. Tell me, about what's the difference in being grounded and being present. Those kind of sound like the same thing.
Sure.
But you distinguish between them. So
sure.
Walk me through those.
Yeah. So when I think of being grounded, I live in rural middle Georgia. I'm surrounded by all these beautiful trees and in nature, and I take a lot of inspiration from nature and the created world. When I consider being grounded, it's about your physical place in the world, having a sense of place, knowing where you come from, experiencing a degree of rootedness in that place, as opposed to constantly needing to leave or flee or be somewhere else, either physically or even in your own mind. Like, how do I make peace with the place I'm in and grow my roots here for as long as I'm here? And that to me is different from being present. When I think of being present, it's more so about where we set our attention. We're we're not lost in the past, we're not lost in the future, but we're right here, we're right now, as best we're able to be in this moment that's in front of us, and making the most of that moment. And so that's how I kind of distinguish between them. Being, again, that groundedness is about rootedness in a place, and then that presence is about attention in the here and now.
Yeah, you say something like being present is a radical act because, I mean, in our current culture, because there's, so much energy and money being poured into distracting our attention, taking our attention away from us. I've been thinking some lately about, distractibility. In some ways, you're a writer. The distractibility is a gift insofar as when you're actually being distracted by real life, your role as a writer is to observe things that aren't obvious how they go together, and you notice and you put them together, and that's what you do. And so distractibility is a gift. It's a gift that has some problems associated with it. And the problem with the online stuff is not that it makes us distracted, but it's that it absorbs our distractibility. It says, instead of giving you, it takes away that gift of noticing the world that has so many different stimuli coming at us. And that's not a bad thing. Your ability to attend to those different things is a good thing.
Sure. That's a really great point. I've been thinking about a few pieces I might write sometime in the near future. And it is true that a lot of the interesting things come from observing the world, observing relationships, the news, how people are responding to the world. And I suppose what's coming to mind for me in this moment is that there's a type of distractibility and openness that is generative, and then there's a type that's not. And it's such a fine line between I'm taking in this information, I'm taking in this stimuli, I'm weaving new connections, I'm inspired. And then there's the side where it's kind of that energy of what we'd call doom scrolling, I guess. This is really just sort of making me sad and slow and sluggish and disconnected, actually. And so there is a fine line there, and we have to perhaps pay attention to what's happening inside of us as we're taking in stimulation. Of course, especially if it's via our phones.
Yeah. You said something that was really interesting. You talked about being that doom scrolling turning you into a person who's sad and slow and sluggish. It feels like you're going and it feels like you're going 100 miles an hour, but really you're being, I guess you're running in place 100 miles an hour.
Oh, absolutely. Even around some recent news stories that I've been sitting with, I try to make a practice of reading news across the political spectrum, and even even like looking at the hot takes from different pundits across the spectrum. And it is just so interesting to me to step back and observe what my algorithm is doing. I'm like, oh my goodness, this thing is feeding me something. And if I stay on one side, it's going to give me more of that, and it'll get more inflammatory. If I stay on the other, it's really interesting. And it can be quite disorienting. I'm like, I don't even know it's true right now, because they're saying exact opposite things. That's just what came to mind.
Yeah. And when reality is mediated through a screen, it will be necessarily, exactly what you're talking about. The algorithm turns us into crazy people.
It can. And then it distracts us from the real life that's happening right underneath our feet, which goes back to that being grounded piece. Because what's happening here in cattle country is quite different than what's happening in so many places around the world.
Yeah. And then we had started talking about three things: being grounded, being present, and then the third thing, which ties it all together, I think, is the idea of receiving and accepting the reality that you've been given, the life you've been given.
Yes.
I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I realized in my own journey, and I write about this some in the book, with my own health and mental health, physical health, all sorts of things, that a lot of the disarray I was experiencing had to do with me trying to make my life something else all the time. Whether that's through my work or through the money I wanted to make or the relationships I thought I needed to have. There was a lot of striving to be something else, to be somewhere else. And I think some of that was the function of my age. You're growing up, you're trying to find your way,
Yeah,
I
sure.
think some of that's very normal. But I started to experience a lot more peace when I realized, okay, here are the limits of the life that I have. I live here. I am married to this person as he is, not as I think he should or could be. I'm married to this person. I am this person, and when I started to accept those things, I found more agency as opposed to thinking I should be something or somewhere else. I also, I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Wendell Berry, the Kentucky farmer and poet and essayist and cultural commentator. And I can't remember the essay that I read, but it was many years ago. And he talks about building a good life on 1 acre instead of expecting that you need 100 acres. And he likened it to the work of loving one woman instead of loving multiple women, through marriage.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me. It's like, what can I do with this 1 little acre that is my life?
Yeah.
And can I create beauty and goodness here? And I think that's tied to that receiving and accepting your life as it is. It's not about, never trying to change things or, it's not about shedding all of that, but it is about saying, how do I start with what is and cultivate some contentment and some joy and some beauty right here?
Yeah. That's so good. At one point in your book, you talk about the fact that you're a gardener, and you're talking about the fact that you're trying to make a garden in a shady yard.
Yes.
And you have your dreams, you have your desires, which the desire to grow a garden seems like a very appropriate desire. That's not you acting like a striver. That's just I want to connect with the ground here. And yet, if you're in a shady yard, there are things you can't do as a gardener. Yeah. Speaking as a gardener who lives in a shady yard, I lit up when I saw your section on that, because what can you? Well, there's plenty you can do.
Yes.
But if you spend all your time thinking about what you can't do and what you wish you could do instead, you're not going to have a garden.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. What can I do with what is right here in front of me?
Yeah. And those limitations are they are a guide to what's your work to do.
They are. It makes me think, I don't know if I reference Parker Palmer in this moment in the book. I know I reference him in other places, but I believe it's in his book, Let Your Life Speak. And he talks about his granddaughter and noticing the type of person she was from a very small age, and just noticing who she is. He's kind of aware of there are some things that will be great for her to do and other things that she wouldn't be so good at them because of who she is, even from the time she's quite young, and how that's true for all of us. There are some things that are just true about who we are, about our nature, about how we're wired, about how we see the world, which will make us better suited for some types of work and less well suited for other types of work. And that's not a failing on our part. That's just accepting who we are and doing our best to embody a vocation that aligns with how we've been wired.
Yeah. Yeah. Who you are as a creature. You're not the God of your universe. You're a creature.
Absolutely.
And you were made with strengths and with weaknesses that if you pay attention can keep you from going off on something that's not your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And it saves you so much energy and time. It really does. It really does. I think so much of, I like to think that a big part of embodying a more beautiful way to live is coming to terms with those limits, embracing them, and then finding the creativity that's there.
Could you say that one more time?
Oh gosh, what did I just say?
The last part of that sentence was, well, I'm getting you off track now.
Oh, no, it's okay. I think I was just speaking to how living a more beautiful way is about coming to understand your limitations and then embracing them and then finding the creativity there.
Yeah. How is that? There's the possibility with that kind of language that I'll end up being passive in ways that aren't healthy, that I will conform myself to powers that aren't doing right.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Sure. I could see that. And that's a tension that I wrestled with, not only in writing the book, but also in living this way. I think that there's in a way, it goes back to being present and to noticing what is generative and then what is perhaps destructive might be overstating it, but it's like you have to pay attention to the fruit of your action or inaction. And so there has been a time as I've been on my own journey where it started to feel really insular in an unhealthy way. Like I'm retreating, I'm disconnected, I'm hiding from the world. I'm actually experiencing a greater degree of fear and timidity. And I'm like, this isn't good because the fruit is disconnection.
Yeah.
And then there's like, okay, well, let me crawl out of this cave and engage more and show up more and participate more. And what I found is that as I have reopened myself to the world after a time of healing and kind of rearranging my life, I'm able to do it with so much more self-awareness. And when I'm on the track that's leading to burnout, I notice and I can kind of redirect. And so it could be tempting to lean into a passivity that is unhelpful. I think that if you are being present, or my hope is that if a person's being present, they'll notice maybe the ways that it's not leading to more life and connection, and that hopefully that would prompt them to make a different choice. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. When you say that when you're on the track to burnout, you notice. What do you notice? What are you talking about?
Oh, yes. It tends to show up in my body first. And by that, I mean felt anxiety. So headaches, chronic like my heart beating fast in situations where I could and should be calm, nausea, like feeling nauseated for no reason. So it tends to show up there like, oh, I'm out of sorts here. Yeah. And then sleeplessness, like an inability for my mind to rest in the evening time. So those are the first ways I notice. And if I don't listen, then I start to notice just all of the vices. I want to be on Instagram all day. I want a second glass of wine when I shouldn't have one. I want all the ice cream. And a lot of this comes back to me knowing myself and coming and learning how to interpret my own body. And so it might be different for those who are listening. You have to know, like, hey, what are those cues that my body gives me or that my life gives me that I'm moving in a direction that's unhealthy as compared to when I'm moving in a direction that is healthier for me. So it might be different, but for me, it tends to be my body tells me, and then I want to do all the things that are unhealthy for me. That tends to be how I notice, and then I'm like, okay, I have to change something in my days.
Yeah, I often say, there are lots of ways to avoid reality, but they tend to lead to shame, and so there are lots of ways to avoid pain. And they tend to lead to shame. So it's kind of like every day you have to choose between pain and shame. Which would I rather go through the pain of sort of facing reality, or would I rather live with the shame of not facing reality? The shame of having that a little more ice cream or a little more wine or whatever.
Absolutely, and the pain doesn't go anywhere, which is what's so tricky.
It's there waiting for you, isn't it?
It's always there waiting for you, and. It's interesting. I was reading the audiobook for A More Beautiful Way to Live last week, and it's rare that you sit down and read your own book over the course of 2 days out loud. It's a very strange experience. Yeah. And I was like, I didn't realize how much I wrote about pain in this book. And I was going through a lot of pain as I was sorting through these practices. And so it was interesting to observe how pain so often is a portal to the deeper healing and connection and beauty that I imagine many of us are longing for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you talk about slow time in this book, and now you might have to help me make the connection because now I'm drawing a blank on what the connection is. But I was really interested in something you talked about in that section about our tendency as we're sort of spinning up to be in this cycle of ignoring and then reacting. So instead of facing what's in front of us, we ignore it until it can't be ignored, and then we react to it. I thought that was really a really helpful way of talking about the goal of slow time, of sort of living not out of that weird cycle, which I've never known to put it in those terms, but it sounds like exactly what I'm doing when I for much of my life. So
Sure. Yeah. So the connection there is when we're moving really, really quickly, we don't often have time to notice what's happening in our inner world. We don't often have time to think, to process, to make decisions. And so yeah, we end up on this loop of I'm trying to get things done. I'm being productive. I'm changing the world. That was my motto. You got to change the world. That's just the world. That was the community I was a part of was really big on changing the world. And so we've got to keep going to make the world a better place. But in doing that, there was this ignoring of the pain of my body, the fracturing in relationships, just the things just were increasingly unwell, and I was moving too quickly to pay attention. And then I end up, in an emergency room having to deal with something that I had ignored for months, if not years on end. And so stepping off of that treadmill, or that hamster wheel, I should say, and taking the time to step back and to look at one's life and to make decisions helps you to be more responsive and not reactive. And it often takes support to do that. I really appreciate and write some about the spiritual director that supported me in that time, helping me notice. I've had counselors who've helped me do that work of stepping back and paying attention, but it required that I first make the choice to get off the hamster wheel. Unfortunately, it wasn't a choice I wanted to make. My body forced me to, because again, I ended up in an emergency room situation. And that happens for people often as well. Your body stops you because you won't stop yourself.
Yeah. You just talked about responding and reacting, which I've never had a firm grasp on the difference between them, but you offer up a distinction that you borrowed from Stephen Covey that I thought was really super helpful, that a reactive person is a person who, if I can get it right, they're focused on things outside their sphere of influence. And then a person who is proactive instead of reactive is paying attention to things that are in their sphere of influence. And I thought that was super helpful.
Yes, I returned to this framework probably, it seems like daily, honestly, because he talks about the circle of concern as compared to your circle of influence. And so your circle of concern is everything that's bothering you, whether it's in the news or your family or your workplace. And then what you have influence over it's just so much smaller. It goes back to that conversation about limits. Who am I? What resources do I have? What are my responsibilities? And so the more you can hone your life in on attending to what's within your sphere of influence, not only do you experience more agency, but I find that you have so much more energy. And so when the opportunity arises to address something that is concerning you, you're doing it from a much more rooted, authentic, grounded place. And it's more generative. I keep using that word, but that's what I'm looking for. Like, what is creating more life? What's creating more connection? And being rooted in that circle of what's within my influence is a game changer.
Yeah. Well, and that language of my circle of concern, it's not saying ignore everything that's not in your control. It's saying be concerned. Just know what you can do and what you can't do.
Exactly.
And then the way you put it reminds me that there are opportunities where your circle of influence can extend and can get bigger. When you're tending to the influence that you have, maybe you can extend out further into that circle of concern.
That's the hope. And, I'm not one I don't necessarily believe that we can change the world in the ways that I used to think that we could. But I do believe it is incredible what can happen when people are focused on tending to the life that's right in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah. You do sound like someone who's been reading Wendell Berry.
Yeah, yes. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, speaking of their circle of influence, circle of concern, or maybe I should say your ability to do and your inability to do, that seems really relevant to anybody who wants to do creative work. One of the great things about being a writer or doing any kind of art is that there always is something you can do. And it seems to me we're also looking outward to that circle of concern as people who are trying to do creative work. And that can be overwhelming. But then you can also go to your desk and say, what can I do today? And one thing I can do today is put down a few sentences.
Absolutely. I think that's one of my favorite things about being a writer in a small way. There's always something I can do in a small way. I think some of my favorite authors are those who are able to make those observations about the world around them and ground their reflections within the uniqueness of their own experience. Yeah, that's some of my favorite writing.
Yeah. Um, and one way you put all this is that there's our inner terrain that we need to pay attention to, and you equate is equate the right word? I'll let you say whether that's the right word or not. Our inner terrain with that circle of influence of what we can do. And again, that seems super relevant to the work of a writer or anybody doing creative work. That always toggling back and forth between my inner life that I've got to be in touch with, and yet looking outward to make sure I'm not falling into a whirlhole of self absorption. And that movement back and forth seems to be pretty central to the creative life. And you talk very, I don't know how much you talk specifically about the creative life in that, but it seems very relevant the way you talk about these things.
I would say so. I think it is, as a writer and someone who loves to journal. So not even when I think of writing, I'm making observations and I'm organizing it in a way that someone else can understand and make meaning of. I also journal a lot, which is a much more self-reflective practice. And as a writer who loves to journal, there is the temptation to be very just unhelpfully introspective.
Yeah.
It's that navel gazing. But I also find it to be a bit boring over time. I don't know. It's
yeah.
It's like I can only think about myself and my feelings for so long before it's like, okay, well, what else, Bethany? Like, there's so much more here. And so thankfully, it does get to be a bit boring. And I start to become very curious about if what is resonating inside of me is also making sense for other people. And that's where I often will then turn to writing essays, because that's a place where you can kind of try to make those connections and see if and what resonates with other people. But the creative process, I think it is very healthy for writers who are inclined to be a bit too introspective. It's healthy for us to get out of that hole and to go see is what's growing inside of me in any way connected to what's growing inside of other people. And I just think that's where the work gets really interesting and fun and perhaps even, I don't know, life-changing.
Yeah. That's I'd never thought of it before you said it, but what a gift to get bored with your own self.
Oh, absolutely. It really is a gift.
Yeah. And it pushes you outward. So good. Okay. You were very honest in talking about a time in your life where you, in the pursuit of self-care, didn't handle things right. You realized you needed to quit a job, and then you quit it in a way that really wasn't. I'll let you tell as much about that as you want to.
Sure.
I'd love to hear you talk through that movement from I got to take care of myself. Now I'm going to do something that's a little rash, that's leaving people hanging a little bit.
Yeah.
The isolation that followed, and then your reentry into the wider life.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yes, absolutely. It's so funny. I imagine you have had these experiences where you're like, "Oh my goodness, that was not the best way to do that." But
absolutely.
You can only live through these things. But yeah, I realized that the job I was in was really overextending me in a lot of different directions, and I just quit my job. Not completely out of nowhere, but not with as much thought as I should have given it.
Yeah.
And it was disastrous, might be overstating it, but it felt disastrous at the time. And in that season, right after I'd quit the job, I was really sad and low and having a hard time. And I remember being at home because my husband and I moved in with my parents for a time there. And I was talking to my dad about something. And I think my response was very cynical. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but I can remember the look in his eyes. And it was as if he was saying, Bethany, yes, you've had your heart broken, but you can't stay here forever. He was kind of like, that was a hard thing. Probably could have handled it differently, but you're going to be okay. You can't live the rest of your life from this defeated place. And again, those weren't his exact words, but that was essentially what he communicated to me. And that was very helpful. And so what I learned in that process, I guess if I were to circle back and do it differently, I may have taken a break from my job. I may have communicated more clearly that I was having a hard time and that I needed support. There were so many other options. But I think when you're in crisis mode, when you're in a place of pain, things get very black and white and you don't always see with clarity, which is where community can be incredibly helpful. And so, yep, it wasn't the best move to just up and quit my job, but I learned from it. And in the future, I would probably do better to listen for what my body actually needed, for what my soul actually needed, and then I would have communicated clearly with those around me.
Yeah, right. Well, there is a phenomenon which I see in which the need for self-care ends up being, I'm going to let other people absorb what's not theirs to absorb. And so when I see the language of self-care, I can be a little suspicious. I mean, on the one hand, I know you got to take care of yourself. You got to put on the oxygen mask on yourself, where you can help anybody else with their oxygen mask. I know all that, and yet in practice, I see so often. I can't teach this class that I was committed to because I got to do some self care. It's like, well, you were supposed to teach this class, and now somebody else has to absorb that. That's not a question. That was just kind of a statement. And you may or may, if you want to respond to that statement.
No, I think you're hitting on something that is really important. I see this a lot too, and I've handled it poorly. I do think that a big part of self-care in a strange way is also community care. And so, and remembering that we are connected to one another. And I think it's important that we find ways, not always a win-win solution isn't always available to us, but I do think that there is something to be said for looking for creative solutions in relationship with the people that we are connected to and to whom we owe things. We do owe things to one another, actually. It's a part of working together, being in a society, and we have to get in the weeds with each other to find out what works best for as many of us as possible.
Well, when you say self-care is community care, you're hitting on a truth that myself is not, it's not the borders of myself don't stop, at the borders of my body. Myself comes from my relationship with other people.
Yes, absolutely.
So how can I take care of myself if I'm not also taking care of this community that makes me myself?
Yes. And I think this is a broader challenge we're navigating in American society as well. What do we owe one another? What does it mean to be citizens together? It's a tricky and changing question, I think.
Yeah, right. And what do we owe to one another? What sort of shared reality can we pay attention to? And, is there any reality that I'm willing to conform myself to instead of saying, no, reality has to be the way I see it?
Oh, gosh, absolutely.
And again, which we started earlier on, we were talking about the algorithm. The algorithm makes sure you don't ever have to conform yourself to anything.
Absolutely, yes. I will say, and I know we might be coming up on time here. I just was thinking, I didn't write about this as much in the book because it was still very new to me as I was writing, but I also had a big change in my faith life as I was nearing the end of this book and returning to church. And I think there was something in that experience for my soul of submitting myself again to a body of faith that was also just really helpful in me reconnecting with that sense of belonging and the need for mutuality in relationship. It's not just about Bethaney and her little world, but I'm a part of a larger body, and I owe something to that body just as that body owes something to me. Like we're connected.
Yeah. I'm really glad to hear you say that you reconnected.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah.
important. Yeah. Okay. So to continue the long sad tale of Bethaney quitting her job the wrong way, you then experienced a period of disconnection, of loneliness. In your effort to do what you need to do for yourself, you realized I've got myself and maybe nothing else. I'm exaggerating, of course.
No, I understand.
And then what was the language you used about? I can't remember how you talk about coming back to the wider world. But I just love to hear you talk about that process. You saying, I'm cut off, and in that being cut off, I'm not really myself anymore.
Yep.
Tell me about the process of sort of coming back.
Sure. I think it started with noticing the sort of emptiness that comes with endless introspection. Back to that point about being bored. And then it also was connected to me being in relationship through some work partnerships where I was like, oh, I still have something to contribute here. I actually am still energized by work out in the world with other people. So those two things were a part of that. First, again, that noticing of, okay, this is getting stodgy and stagnant and doesn't feel good. Oh, and this other work is very life-giving to me, to be connected, to be partnering with other people to solve problems in their communities. So that was the beginning of the noticing. And then pointing back to my journey back into a community of faith, I would say that also opened my heart again. When you have had your heart broken in relationships, whether it's with individuals or with institutions, the journey of healing, it takes time. And it takes vulnerability, and there is a risk there. And so I think for anyone who has kind of, maybe taken a step back or retreated a bit for the sake of healing or quote unquote self-care or whatever it might be, once you are ready and willing to open up again, it will feel risky. And I think that's important. It just means you're alive, that you're growing, that you're changing. And yeah, it seemed worth it. It seemed worth the risk. And there were people along the path who supported me in that opening up again.
Yeah, yeah. In one sense, writing a book and putting it out in the world is a way of reaching out to the world. But it's still not the same thing as actually connecting with people who are in your community, in your, who you see at the grocery store, who you see at church.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm glad to know you're doing both.
Oh, yes. Me too. It's amazing how life-changing it is and has been. That would be a whole other podcast for another time. It's been quite the journey.
Okay. Well, we do need to wrap up, but talk to me about who are the writers who make you want to write? Not quite the same thing as who are your favorite writers necessarily.
Yes. Oh, okay. So one author that comes to mind right now is Paul Kingsnorth.
I was thinking about Paul Kingsnorth as I was reading your book. Yeah.
And a lot of it's because I'm reading his book Against the Machine right now.
Yeah.
And as I'm reading him, I keep stopping to go jot down my own thoughts and my own notes. Yeah. And so in a very real way, he's helping me think through other things I might want to write. So Paul Kingsnorth, definitely. And I love his Substack, Abbey of Misrule. Yeah. I'm also in a book club reading through all 6 of Jane Austen's novels right now.
Really? Oh,
and
wow.
I've never read Jane Austen. I didn't read her as a young person. And so her vocabulary is incredible. And so I'm literally taking notes in the margins when I don't know what a word means. And that has also been incredibly inspiring to me.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
great.
I guess, and they're both from the UK. So
yeah,
Paul and Jane.
Yeah, good for you to be experiencing Jane Austen for the first time. That's really,
yes.
And frankly, I think encountering her as an adult for the first time, there's some real advantages to that instead of as a teenager thinking this is boring. Everybody's just talking and dancing.
It's true. She's so funny, and her characters are so interesting. Yeah. It really has been a delight.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bethaney, speaking of delight, it's been a delight to talk to you. Thanks for being here. And I hope a lot of people read and benefit from your book.
Oh, thank you so much.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.